Okay, so fun 2v2 matchup here. Uh, I'm rocking the vampire counts. My buddy here, Justice, is rocking the high elves. I seem to be playing with him a lot lately, but anyway, always a good time, so why not? On the other side, we're playing against like basically a vegetable salad. Uh, Rocking the Lizardman is a guy named Carrot, and rocking the Tomb Kings is a guy named Potato. So Carrot and Potato versus Justice and Otter. Pretty cool map. Like it's very picturesque. You've got the castles in the background, the trees here, very nice. So you know there's going to be a lot of cover from missiles. So the vamp counts, I thought they'd be in their element. For my army, I wanted to pick something a little bit different. So I went with Ghorst. He's kind of an unloved lord, and he can do his own thing, but he's not as, like, let's say, overpowered as some of the other lords that the vampire counts have access to, and so you tend to very rarely see Ghorst. But this was a friendly, casual matchup, and I thought it would be fun to bring him. And I also brought two banshees because I think they're also sort of underused and in the right spot. Like if they're not taking magical damage, they're very slippery. They can live for a long time, and they're fun. They're just like a pest for other factions. A couple units of Blood Knights in the rear. My friend Justice has Prince with some Dragon Princes down below. A couple Shadow Warriors, the skirmish. Front line of White Lions, and then nothing too exciting for me. Just some Graveguard and yada yada. The Lizardmen, they've got some Saurus Warriors, Saurus Spears in the back, Ancient Stegodon over here with for the Skink Priest, and then they've got the Saurus Old Blood in the middle. I think the Saurus Old Blood is one of the most competitive picks for the Lizardman. Actually, probably my personal favorite. Reason it being, he's got the Horn of Krygor, and that plus 25 melee attack and leadership buff is just so important for the Lizardman frontline, because they tend to have a little bit of a lower melee attack relative to some other factions. Obviously, not as much as the undead factions, but if you're comparing them versus elves, for example, they're not going to have the high melee attack. And then, so for Obnoxious Potatoes army, he's got Cetra, he's got a Tomb Prince to, these two can tag team most large units with no problem. And another large unit here is the Sphinx of Yusef. I never can say that right, but we'll call him the big Sphinx for today. This guy can just give the business to anything large. And versus vampire counts, like especially when there's a lot of tree cover, I think it's the way to go. Because the vampire counts, even though they have these, death volley front lines, really most of their killing power tends to come with their large units, like the Blood Knights and things like that. So you pretty much can't go wrong with the Necro, the big Sphinx, because he can dumpster the front line units because of his mass, and then he can also take out the large units with his anti-large bonus. So we'll see. Anyway, maybe I'm talking too much here. Let's just get into the action. So initial start. Lizardmen have some skinks deployed up on the far side here. We go up to not necessarily engage them, but to pressure. I think initially we start heading in the direction of the Tomb Kings, but then we realize, okay, there's a whole front line of Lizardmen right here, and they're kind of spread out. So we're like, okay, let's go in here, try and 2v1 these lizards, and we do a pretty good job of getting in here. As soon as we recognize that this is where the full Lizardmen army is. And usually, like, because the undead are kind of slow getting over here, you can get through it pretty quickly. So we were hoping we could do some damage, but little did we know this Skink Priest of Heavens was rocking the Curse of Midnight Wind. And I'll show you later in the fight when he drops that, but basically this skill can buy you a lot of time, and in this matchup it was critical, because instead of us being able to wipe the Lizardmen very quickly, Curse of Midnight Wind, because it dropped their melee attack, it kept all of these troops up for just long enough basically for all of the Tomb King to make their way over here. And credit to Potato, like he's not rushing in here piecemeal. He's being very disciplined. He's keeping his units together, and he's just working his way over to help. So meanwhile, Saurus Old Blood is starting to take a lot of pressure. The two Banshees have come in on him. His leadership is dipping a little bit. The Prince dives in, makes a huge charge on the Skink Priest of Heavens. That's a nice target for him. Skink Priest of Heavens widely retreats. He's got the spears nearby, some javelins, which can throw in some debuffs. And there it is. That's the Curse of the Midnight Wind right there. You see that like blue cloudy smoke? That's going to drop the melee attack of all of these units in here. It's going to keep the Lord alive, keep the Stegodon, the Skink Priest of Heavens alive, and just really just buy time again for that Tomb King lineup to come over here. Shadow Warriors are over here skirmishing. Justice did bring a Mage of Life. He's in kind of a dicey position. The Dragon Princes are looking for an opening here, but everything's sort of balled up, and there's nothing too much exposed. The Varix Reavers, they did charge in. I figure, okay, they've got some regen, so I can use them to just put in a charge here and stall them out. I did have a unit of Karen Race idle back here for a little bit. I probably should have sent them in here or here, so they do make their way there eventually, but there was a lot going on here. So yeah, I think we're a little busy. Shield of Thorns drops, weapon damage plus 25%, so this is kind of our turn to be a little bit active. The Graveguard units, I have Vanhel's Dance Macabre and Herman Ghorst, so you know, when I can afford the Winds of Magic, I am popping it to try and counteract the melee debuffs of the Lizardman, but I also have Curse of Years, so I can basically retaliate with a debuff of my own and limit the attack damage of these Lizardman units. So they've been taking a beating for a while. Sword Soul Blood is pretty much fully surrounded. He's having a tough time. But the Two Kings have arrived. Corpse Card is getting just crapped on by the Two Prince and etc. Nothing it can do. It doesn't have the mobility to kite it anyways, and it's a little bit far from its infantry here. The Karen Race did come over here, and they're doing a good job just cutting up some spears and some Saurus Warriors. The Dragon Princes are getting a little bit tied up in some of these Saurus spears, so not the best place for them. Ditto with the Varix Reavers. They've also been sort of body blocked. I don't know if it's from the trees or their own Karen Wraith charge or whatnot, but they're not where they should be right now, so a little mistake there. But balance bar slightly in our favor. I think because we were able to wipe out the main line of the Lizardmen there, we're doing okay. The Prince has found his way back up into the air. The Skink Priest of Heavens has taken a pretty hard beating. The Pterodon Riders, they're not going to do very well versus the Prince for long. But in the back line, we didn't notice this, but there's a Necrotech sitting here. And unfortunately for us, we've done nothing to pressure him. Had I known this or recognized this earlier, I probably would have taken my two Banshees and tried to slip them around and put some pressure on this Necrotech, because if you have a Necrotech plus the Sphinx, you've got access to a lot of heals, a lot of support. Let's see what he brought here. So the Necrotech, so he brought Restore to replenish the health and actually nothing else. So pretty light on the Necrotech build, but I guess it's enough to just keep the big Sphinx fighting. Skink Priest of Heavens comes in with a massive rear charge with the Prince occupied over here with the Pterodon Riders. He comes down. The Sphinx chases the Prince off. That's not a place that the Prince wants to be. Over here, the pocket of spears and other things have basically terror-routed from the pressure of the Banshees and some rear charges from these Knights here. But the Blood Knights, which just been cycle charging in here, the Karen Race and Banshees. The Prince does a nice charge. He's again just trying to take that Skink Priest of Heavens off the board as quickly as he can, but the Sphinx of whatever, the big Sphinx is here, and basically sitting right next to this Skink Priest of Heavens, make it very difficult for the Prince to land. The damage does eventually add up those Skink Priest routes, and I think here was a decisive, maybe a turning point in the battle. Balance bar slightly in our favor here. Prince maybe getting a little anxious or not sure where he's going to be most useful. You see him coming down here and try and get a charge in on Cetra and the Tomb Prince. But Obnoxious Potato wisely pulls the Tomb Prince out of the way so he doesn't get hit by the charge from the Prince. And then he rotates the Tomb Prince back and cycles him in to support Cetra. Now, if you look at Cetra, Cetra is designed to take out large units like this. Like, if you look at her kit, let me just pause this here. So, Cetra, can I get on her? There we go. 470 armor pen damage with a bonus versus large, melee attack of 60, melee defense of 55. So, in a one-on-one combat, it's going to be pretty atrocious, but Cetra's going to be probably cheaper on that mount. And with the Tomb Prince nearby, like, this is going to be a very expensive trade. Also, the Dragon Princes and the healer, the Lore of Life healer, have been routed off the map just from pressure from the spears and other things. While I think Justice is busy microing here, so all the damage that goes on this Prince can't be reversed. And if you look at this, because of the charge from the Tomb Prince, look at this with Tomb Strike, 435 armor pen. So between Cetra and the Tomb Prince, that's like 8. Look at this, with the Dijas incantation, that's 564 armor pen bonus versus large, and this one 435 armor pen bonus versus large. That's like well over 1,000 damage. And like the Prince with his 464 damage armor pen, like he can't even come close to competing. Sphinx comes over here and just basically scares him away. So if you're the Prince, like you basically have to just always try and attack on the flanks, attack wherever these 3 units aren't. The Necrosphex, the Tomb Prince, and Cetra. And if you were going to try and goon anything, it should have been the Necrotech. Now, I don't want it, or the Skink Priest of Heavens, or Source or Blood. Just make sure they come off the board. I don't want to pick on Justice there because, you know, like I didn't recognize it. I didn't recognize that Necrotech either. Otherwise, I would have sent over those Banshees. But he's pretty hidden in here. Like, you look, there's 3 flags, and he's like right in the back. So like, oh, tough luck for us. The Skink Priest of Heavens does get routed off from a charge of like some very broken Dragon Princes, and then there we go, Justice. So he makes up for it, I guess. There, he gets his man, takes out the Source Old Blood. So the Lizardman's leadership is off the field. Balance bar very, very even. Herman Ghorst has been, giving whatever buffs he can. Banshees are at full health, which is kind of nice. Herman Ghorst also at full health. Leadership is up. I'm out of summons though. So it's just down to this pretty tattered infantry here to see if they can hold. The Pterodon Riders coming up here, distracting the Prince, just mucking him up and preventing him from doing what he wants to do. Meanwhile, the Sphinx of the Biggie is over here just smashing away at these Blood Knights. And if I pull it, I'm sort of in a catch-22 here. Because if I engage the Blood Knights, I'm going to take a ton of damage here. The Blood Knights can't hold against Cetra, plus the Necrotech, plus the Tomb Prince, plus the Sphinx. So I have to retreat with them. But at the same time, if I do retreat, then I don't have the mass to deal with the Sphinx, right? He can cycle charge as much as he wants, he can knock the infantry back, and basically he can prevent the infantry from surrounding the Tomb Prince, Cetra, all of these other things that are pretty tattered. Over here, the Prince gets pinned down with some Ushapti Greatbow, and they have enough mass that Prince is going to have a very hard time getting away from that. With his damage already so high, like that's going to be like his health already so low, that's going to be a problem. He does have stand your ground and the melee defense, so I think we really need, even if he doesn't get engaged in the fight, we really need him to slap that melee defense buff over here in this big pocket. Sorry. So the Tomb King infantry is starting to crumble. Shadow Warriors are pulling sort of spears around the map, but it's sort of a wash there, not too much damage being done. Chameleon Skinks are out of ammo, and they're just being pesky, but they're not really doing too much. The Banshees do find their way onto Cetra the Imperishable, and that's a really nice position for them to be in. Cetra does not have bonus versus infantry, and they, if you look at how it tanks, like really low. Balance bar is still pretty even, but the Prince got caught up on his Shopti summon, and then the Sphinx was able to finish off the Prince. So 2 lords are down now. It's up to Herman Ghorst versus pretty tatted Cetra, and this Sphinx of bigness, who's like, he's just wrecking face now. 750 damage, 715 damage with armor pen, and 100 armor. Like, there's not a lot of answers I have to him. I send the Banshees after him, which is pretty risky because he does have magical damage. So in theory, he should be able to ignore the physical resist of these Banshees, right? But I think because the model is so big, when he gets these attacks, he ends up just like charging and knocking the Banshees out of the way. And for some reason, these attacks of this Necro Sphinx are just not hitting the Banshees. So that was kind of an interesting thing right there. So with him out of the way, the two Banshees are able to get back onto Cetra because he temporarily attacked Herman Ghorst, but I didn't want Ghorst to die either, so I do pull the Banshees back, and now I'm hoping that maybe with some leadership gone, I'll be able to do some damage on the Sphinx. But this Necrotech right here and the Tomb Prince are just doing everything they can to concentrate their firepower in one little pocket here and prevent the Sphinx from getting surrounded by the Banshees plus Ghorst. That was slightly in my favor, but now I've lost all my summons, and I've lost basically all of the shields that I have around Ghorst and the Banshees. And making matters worse, there's no mass, there's no blood knights, right? Everything else on the map is pretty much gone, so now it's going to be pretty much a grind to the finish. So I'm going to fast forward here. Again, my big mistake, not finishing off the Tomb Prince, not finishing off the Necrotech, but I knew that if I didn't come down and support, like, Ghorst was just going to get smashed around by this Sphinx. So I did my best to try and protect Ghorst. And the leadership of the Sphinx did drop pretty low, but yeah, that's pretty much all she wrote. The mass was too much, but it was a really fun match. I got to try a unit that people don't usually use, which is, Ghorst, so that was cool for me. And if a couple things went a bit differently, maybe the outcome would have been different if we still would have had some healing on the field. And maybe if we would have recognized the Lizardmen a bit earlier and could have just wiped them out, that could have been the difference in the game. So let's go to the replay screen and the end of battle screen, and I'll just bounce a few ideas where I think maybe I could have done things differently. So Ghorst, he does have access to like a large mount, but I think that would not have been the answer to get the mass that we needed to sort of deal with the Sphinx at the end, because if he was large, then he would have been super vulnerable to Cetra and the Sphinx and the Tomb Prince. So I think keeping him on foot is the way to go if you're going to go vampire counts. And the vampire counts, that they're very reliant on their large to counteract other large. Like their skeleton spearmen, they just don't cut it. Their melee attack is way too low to be useful, and they don't have armor pens. So things like the Sphinx, like they can pretty much just ignore them. So if these Blood Knights drop, you basically lose your answer to units like the Necro Sphinx. Maybe what I could have done is I could have taken a Vargulf just for the mass. The Vargulf does have enough speed that he could basically pester the Necro Sphinx. The Necro Sphinx can beat it in a one-on-one fight, obviously, but if the Vargulf can kind of just cycle charge, keep pinning it, keep regenerating up its health, maybe that could have been an answer. Other than that, a couple Right Kings could have worked maybe. They have a bonus versus infantry, but they do have, armor pen and pretty high damage output. So, maybe that's another option. But, yeah, fun build there. Justice, nothing too crazy here. The Shadow Warriors, I don't know if they got max value because of the map. Like, there was a lot of tree cover, so probably hard for them to shoot. The White Lions are great, but they need, I think, Foss protection if they're going to have any sort of staying power, because once they drop, it's pretty much GG for the White Lions. They are a nice pick though versus the Lizardmen, and probably they did their fair share of work against the Saurus early in the fight. Obnoxious Potato, like you saw, the Sphinx just dominated everything. I think if you're going up against a build like this, make sure you try and isolate the necrotacking and just get them off the map, because otherwise you can do all the damage you want to this Sphinx. He's just going to keep healing up, and you're going to waste too much time, too many resources trying to deal with him. I do think the Banshees worked very well versus Cetra, so that was kind of a plus. And I think the Tomb Prince also struggled to deal with the Banshees, so they were a fun pick. And if the other, if the Tomb Kings don't go with the Lore of Death and take Soul each, they have a really hard time dealing with them. And then, yeah, Saurus Old Blood, great pick. Pterodon Riders, not sure how much value they contributed. They pestered the Prince a little bit. The Chameleon Skinks, they were a bit annoying. I don't know if they got value for the same reason that the Shadow Warriors. I don't think they got a ton of value because they were just covered in the woods. So King Priest of Heavens was fantastic unit for them. The Curse of the Midnight Winds hit so many units at the start, and he still, despite being gooned by the Prince and other things, managed to rack up 244 kills. So it worked out really well against the Vampire Counts, who tend to struggle with anti-large. They can't really shoot. They don't really have good infantry that can deal with it. So again, if you go large against the Vampire Counts, you're probably going to have a good time. So thanks to the vegetable salad, carrot and potato for the game, and also my buddy Justice for sticking with me through a very close match here. And on to the next one. Take care, guys. Bye.